Welcome back, folks. We got another episode coming up.
We do.
We're again reviewing some music here. It's been a great year for hip hop, I'll say. I
It
think
really
we've got
has.
some great projects so far.
I agree.
Um, this is a project. Well, let's say this: we're talking Vince Staples here today.
Right.
Vince Staples' new album just came out 2 weeks ago, I think. Um, I've always been like a big Vince Staples guy. I feel like you haven't necessarily. I feel like there's been times where we agree the music's good or whatever, but like
Mhm.
he hasn't really necessarily been one of your favorites, I would say. Is that accurate?
Yeah, like you definitely put me on, and I he has a cool sound. He's very, especially of lately, I found he's very like monotone and kind of keeps to this one sounding lane. So I'd find like one or two from different projects that I'd enjoy, and those would kind of be the ones I'd listen to. But yeah, never really been huge on Vince.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this new album, Dark Times, again, came out a couple weeks ago now. Um, let's jump in and review this thing. I mean, off the bat, let me know how you felt about this project just in general.
Yeah, so for those who listen who didn't see the video I had just posted a couple days ago, um, at that time I had said that this was my number one hip hop project of the year. And you let me know that that's a little absurd.
Well, for me,
Right.
I mean, I don't have it as number one, but that's me.
Right. And I mean, I didn't really see any comments saying that that take was crazy. It was more
Yeah.
so about some other projects. But I listened to it for, I think this is the fourth time I listened to it all the way through. And I would say that that list will change. Um, because when listening to it the other times, I was working. This is one of the best background albums I've heard in a long time. It's great background music if you're down for like a chill vibe, which if you actually look at the music or the lyrics, it's not very chill at all. It's,
Mhm.
some heavy details of his life. But the instrumentals themselves are very chill. Um, Pretty simplistic than what we're used to listening to, especially coming off the Childish Gambino album. But it's still a real solid album, and I did enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll agree with a lot of that. I think it's very mellow. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Um, it is a great project, just in general. Um, and let's get into kind of specifics here. Starting off with the production, because you brought up Childish Gambino's album, which is a little bit out there in terms of production compared to this one. But I think I ended up giving it almost the same rating. I gave the production here an eight,
Mm.
because while it is pretty mellow and low key, it's still very unique and well crafted to match the tone of what he's coming with for every song. Um, I think it like is generally flowing from like competent moments where it's just good and fine to some cool, memorable, and unique instances on tracks here and there. I also think the samples and incorporation of instruments are very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I'll just go with unique again because it is
Yeah,
unique. He comes with some cool like guitars on backgrounds in different parts where you're like, whoa, this is a super cool incorporation here. And it does make the beat an interesting part. There's never a point on the album where I'm like, all right, this beat is tired. Like let's
100%.
move on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. While writing my notes, I think I got halfway through and I said like I'm still loving all of the production so far. Like I'm not tired of it or anything like that. I ended up giving it a 9 because I I love and I value very simple beats if you can um make it so that the listener isn't tired of listening to it. And I think he pulls that off phenomenally. And yeah, there's still a ton of little details. Like one of the ones that I caught was in Justin, um, when he says like knocking on the door in the background, you hear like a couple knocks. So just like little details like that. I love those kinds of things. Um, and there's a you can hear a little bit of influence from that old West Coast kind of hip hop, which I really like. That's the style that I'm really familiar with and what I kind of grew up on. So it was cool to hear um some of that influence in these beats.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's a stronger point on the album. And let's move on now from that to what I feel like has always kind of been his weakness,
Mhm.
which is the vocal portion of the album. You mentioned it's often pretty monotonical. Um, Despite this on this project, I feel like he's able to not only on this project but on a lot of his music, he's kind of able to overcome that weakness. Like it's clear that he knows he's not going to come in and be Drake on a song or Post
Right.
Malone or even like a Kanye or a Childish Gambino or even like have the memorability maybe of like a Kendrick Lamar's vocal style.
Mhm.
But I feel like he overcomes this a lot of the time with how unique uh, he utilizes his flows. Like there's a lot of times where he just is so smooth with the beat and the transitions
Mhm.
and brings in flows that I'm like, whoa, this is like, an original, he's not just recycling what everybody else is doing in terms
Right.
of flows, which I feel like that paired with like the vocal inflections he uses on this project prevents it from becoming very boring
Mhm.
despite a very similar vocal tone throughout the whole uh, album. It doesn't really ever become too mundane. I gave the vocals a 6 because it is a little monotonical, but it's not ever to the point where you're like, all right, this is enough.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I was pretty close with you. I gave vocals a 7 because even though it's monotone, um, it's still unique to him, and there's still somewhat of complexion in his vocals when being monotone. It's not like the flow definitely has a lot to do with helping the vocals sound better, like you were saying. I think one of the best times that the flow carried because of how different it was from the rest of the album was in Little Homie. I think it was his best flow. I think it was very unique to what the rest of the album had to offer. Um but also when I hear when if you were to play a song by him just randomly one day, I would be able to tell you straight away, this is Vince Staples. Like it's his style, it's his voice. I don't know anybody else who's rapping like this, and it might not be the greatest vocals, but it's at least very prominent, and it is Vince. So I gave it a
Yeah.
7.
Um, Kind of paired with the vocal performance here is it's crazy for someone like him because where vocals are often his weakest part, it's always his lyricism that I'm impressed with.
Yeah.
He First of all, it's super funny because if you ever watch Vince Staples in anything other than like his music, you get a completely different guy than what you're listening to
Yeah.
on his tracks. Like he's just super funny, super dry. You never get like any kind of insight or seriousness out of him. But like his lyrics are always very self-conscious and self-aware and interesting and introspective, which I've always really respected about him. Um, I will say on this project, I think that his his signature storytelling and thought provoking style throughout this stand out as the best part on the album as I feel like it normally does with him. Um, he does showcase a lot of versatility in his ability to provide insightful commentary on things that are going on in his life or in the world, which is pretty cool in a lyrical rap world where everything is so focused on like double entendres or crazy wordplay. He doesn't feel the need to like try to do all that much that everybody else is doing, and he also like avoids being corny. Like there's kind of this tale of two sides in lyrical rap right now where people are either doing super corny stuff or
Hmm.
like are just going super hard on like double triple entendres and
Right.
doing like the most with imagery and that kind of stuff. And just his storytelling and the way he words things is like super introspective and interesting and makes this project really stand out amongst the rest to me, and kind of stand away from the norm of what's going on in lyrical rap. With that being said, I gave the lyrics a 9. I think
Wow.
it's very close to his best. Um, but I do think I've heard better from him. I think I've heard better lyrical rap just in general. But it's right up there. It's very good.
Yeah, that's fair hearing where you're coming from. For me, I have it a lot lower. I do have his lyrics at a 6 because it's not his fault because I do think that he does a pretty solid job with being because he's more direct, like you're saying. He doesn't do these double, triple entendres. He's pretty direct with what he's saying. He's just very good at putting these sentences and these lyrics together. It just sucks because for me, I feel like I've heard a lot better this year lyrically from a bunch of different artists. And so I don't blame Vince for that, but I enjoy, and that's more personal preference too. I enjoy
Yeah,
the more lyrical side where I kind of got to think about it a little bit. Nothing too crazy where it is like triple entendres, but I like the thought provoking. Granted, there were a bunch of couple lines where I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." One of them being, it was too loud to hear the ambulances over helicopters or something like that. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's kind of cool little aspect, little into your mind kind
yeah.
of thing." Um, but I mean, I agree. Like his storytelling on this album, solid. I think one of the better songs on the album was Justin. Granted, it was pretty short, and that's my only grievance with that
Hmm.
track. But yeah, I just more so to personal preference and who I've heard this year kind of hurt that score, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's kind of hard to articulate what makes his lyricism so good to me, but it's just like he takes things that you've heard a million times and phrases it in a new way that's
Mhm.
like kind of blows my mind to some extent. Like in the same way that a double or like a crazy wordplay will blow my mind, just the
Mhm.
way he rephrases things blows my mind. Like
Yeah.
the one that comes to mind for me is on, I think it's on Government Cheese. He's talking about one of his friends who's incarcerated and like calls him on the phone, and Vince is like, yeah, everything's good here because I can't tell him how things really are.
Mhm.
What kind of friend would I be if I'm doing that? These are the only 20 minutes of freedom he's going to get in his life. Like I can't just tell him like I'm dealing with all this stuff that doesn't mean anything to him. But then he goes on to say a couple lines later, it's hard to sleep when you're the only one living the dream. And I was like, that
That's a
is
bar.
a bar. That is crazy.
That's a
Like
bar.
just the way it's things like that. That's just the way he words it that I'm like,
Yeah.
what, how, like how do you even think to say things like that? I don't know,
Yeah.
because it's not like super deep in the layers, but it's just the way he rephrases things is crazy to me.
Yeah.
um and kind of talking about songs like this and in Justin, it's pretty easy to see that Vince generally approaches a project with like a concept or a theme in view, and when we get to the concept or theme of this album, it's almost like we do get the dark times theme, just like the ups and downs of life that he's going through, but I almost feel like each song has its own theme within that. Like he's approaching this like these are the parts of my life that I'm struggling with a lot, but like individually, here's all these moments broken down into their own track, which I think is super cool. We're really just kind of getting a peek into his life. You hear his vulnerability and storytelling about real stuff that he's dealing with. It's not really a groundbreaking project in terms of its concept. I will say, even for him, I feel like he's got better concept albums. Um, but it's very respectable, and I ended up giving it a 7 because I do enjoy the concept. I'll probably go back to it at various points just for the concept,
Mhm.
um, and because it's a good listen. But yeah, I felt like it was a solid theme throughout the album.
Yeah, I agree. I also have the concept at 7. Um, I like you were saying, he does very good at what he's portraying and what each song is trying to tell within that story. I just feel like we've gotten so many albums where it is this kind of same concept, and so for that I feel like it's getting a little overplayed, which sucks because eh, you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about as an artist when you're going through it. It's the best time.
Right.
Um so it's not, once again, it's not like his fault. It just happened to fall in a time where we're getting a lot of that right now, and you know as an audience, the audience always wants to hear something new. So if anything feels the exact same, it gets a little boring. And but I mean, even then, a 7's not bad in the slightest.
Right.
I think he does a very good job with how he's telling each story. And I feel like, one, at times it's very relatable, just kind of like being down. Um, but I don't know. I felt like he kept me engaged for a good majority of it. So
Yeah, for sure. I was I really wanted to, after listening to this album a couple of times, I really wanted to bring a crazy rage bait statement that I just can't quite justify because it's not quite true. But I really wanted to say, to upset people, that this is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers if it was a good album, because it's a very similar theme. And I will say, musically, I vastly prefer this one, but
oh,
I don't think it's quite on the same spectrum in terms
yeah.
of what they're approaching here throughout it.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
not on
clipping
quite the
that.
same concept level,
Yeah, you're gonna make a
but
lot of people mad because I'm
yeah,
clipping that.
it's straight rage bait because like I think Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is a respectable project.
Yeah.
It's a lot of its value to me throughout this Drake and Kendrick beef because I feel like he's backtracked everything he said. But I will
Yeah.
say, just musically, I way prefer this album with a similar concept to the Kendrick album
Yeah.
for me. Um, but let's jump into features or lack thereof for the most part. Um, how do you feel about like virtually a featureless album? You get like one or two kind of vocal samples here and there,
Yeah.
but it's really just Vince.
Man, this is one of the few times that I feel like we've gotten an album that lacks features, and it sounds great. I Besides those couple samples, I don't think it needed one feature. I think it's cool that he took it upon himself to make this. Granted, it's what he's going through, which I think helps the case of no features a lot. The only thing that I feel like he could have done if he wanted to was if he had a homie that's close to him that grew up with him that's in the music scene hop on a verse, then
Yeah.
that's like a little bit more to him. But yeah, I think it was cool. I don't think that the project really needed it. I gave it a 7. Um, just because of things I've said before. It is engaging, but then there's the monotone. Granted, at times it's solid, but so yeah, it's just more backtracking of what I've said before. But I think for the most part, what he did was perfectly fine.
Yeah, I'll agree with it. I think it generally works in his favor on this one to not have any features. Um, we're really just dealing with and confronting personal situations for him, um, that regardless of other people going through similar stuff, I think him approaching it on his own pretty much works in his favor. Like it adds to that element of it. It doesn't, like, I love the fact that it doesn't feel like he's just diluting the album down for like cheap clout essentially to get people to listen. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, we've got Vince on a song with Tyler the Creator, or like something he could very easily do, or even with an artist that like has gone through similar stuff. Like people
Hmm.
could for sure see that and be like, oh my gosh, let's give this one a listen, and miss out on really what's going on the song.
Yeah.
So generally, I will say I really agree with everything you said. I do think there's moments that could be benefited from a little diversity, like you're saying, even if it was just like from like a little bridge or a chorus from an artist here or there, like Sampha or someone that could do
Yeah.
something cool. But generally, I think it works in his favor. It's fine. I really don't have any gripes with it. I also gave that a 7.
Yeah.
Um, and let's wrap up this discussion here about the album with the replay value. Um, let me know what you think about the replay value, because I'm curious on what you think about this.
So if I would have never really paid attention to the album, it probably would have been a lot higher because like I said, it's it's very mellow music, something that you could just throw on in the background and just have it play. Um, but to listen to and to like want to, rap or sing along, to me, it doesn't really have all
Yeah,
that much. There's one song that I did download, and that is Little Homie. I think that one has a great vibe to it. The instrumental is one of my favorites on the album. The chorus is phenomenal. And like I said earlier, his flow I think is the cleanest on that song. But other than that, I didn't really find myself like, nodding my head to the beat or,
yeah,
like wanting to go along with it. So for that, I gave it a 6. But
yeah. I will say I agree with a lot of what you said. There's not a whole lot of songs that I'm gonna just shuffle on and listen to in the background. But
yeah,
I will say, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, as far as albums we've reviewed on the podcast here, there's not a ton so far that we've talked about that I'm going to go back to and listen to the whole album just for the replay value of the whole album all that frequently. Like every
mhm,
once in a while, I'll go back to an album just if I haven't heard it in a while to kind of get the experience again. But there's a few albums here and there where I'll kind of just go through it every once in a while just because I like going through it. And
yeah,
I feel like this is one of those albums.
mhm,
I feel like we all have like melancholy times in life, or like even just chill moments in life, like you're saying, when you just want something in the background, or it's just a late night walk or something or whatever. And at 35 minutes with not a whole lot of trash music on here, this is one of those albums where I feel like I'm going to get the replay value from the album as a whole.
yeah,
Um, in going through it a couple more times, I will say I've enjoyed it more and more each time for me personally. It, my biggest gripe with the album as a whole, in like all the attention that it's getting so far, is I just don't think it's lived up to the past projects he's put out, in my view. It for sure is very good, and I like you have it in my top 5 hip hop albums so far for this year. But I think his last 2 projects are a little bit better. This one is pretty close to his older album, Big Fish Theory, for me.
mhm,
I think this one's a little stronger top to bottom than that one, but um, it has a lot of playability to it in that context for me. Like I'll throw it on here and there just to hear it again because it's good quality. It's not an album that you're going to hear on like Friday nights playing
right,
with the little homies and everybody. Like that's just not going to be. the case, but I don't think he's really going for that. I don't think
Right.
that's really the purpose of this album. So I started off with this at a 7, but just before we started, I bumped this up to an 8 because I
Mm.
do think I'll listen to it a little more than I initially anticipated. Because there's really not too many misses on it.
Yeah.
In terms of like replaying through it, I don't think I'm going to skip all that much if I want to listen to the whole album. So,
Yeah.
um, overall, the album rates out at a 7.5 for me.
Mm.
It might be just slightly low. I may like I kind of feel like it's closer to an 8, but
Mm.
in the ballpark.
Yeah. Mine came out to exactly 7 out of 10, and that's probably exactly where I would put it. So
So where does this album fall for you now if you have to re you know
redo that
revamp
list.
your list that you did a couple days ago?
Um, it would probably fall down to 4. Um, that Metro album would probably stay at 5. Then 3, I don't care what anybody says. Might delete later would be 3. 2 is Gambino's album, and then Benny the Butcher is back at my number 1.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give a little sneak preview of what I've got going so far. I have the J. Cole project at 5.
Mm.
I did like that one a little better than the 21 Savage and the Schoolboy Q project. And then I have this one at 4. At 3, I've got the Childish Gambino. I have the Metro Future at 2, and
Mhm.
then the Benny the Butcher at 1 for me right now.
No vultures?
No, no, no.
Dude, somebody said, "Dude, where's vultures?" on that video. I was like,
Yeah,
"No, that album sucks." And they're like,
yeah,
"Why?" And then I just never responded because I'm not getting into that.
yeah.
Yeah.
We've made a lot of fans mad in our day on the
Oh yeah.
internet. Most recently Eminem fans apparently, because as an Eminem fan, I'm apparently not allowed to say what I think would make for a good Eminem
Yeah.
album.
You're very hateful
Um,
towards Eminem.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've really just only despised Eminem on our channel
Yeah.
by saying what I think good music would be
Yeah.
from him.
I don't know how you could
Um,
say something like that.
yeah, but I will say in my experience, I feel like the Kanye fans and the Taylor Swift fans, you can reason with them the least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There's not even any trying. You just no.
it really not.
No. But
Before we close this one out here, do you have a best, worst, and most underrated song?
I do. So for my best, definitely Little Homie for all of the reasons that I've already expressed. My worst, I can't pronounce that word. I don't even know how to try.
No, don't
Yeah.
say that one. What?
Yeah,
Oh, that's crazy.
I wasn't vibing with that one all that
That's
much.
crazy.
Uh, what did I have to say? Least fave, still solid production. That's really all I had to say about it.
Wow,
Um,
crazy.
but my most underrated is Justin. I loved the story. It was very easy to follow along. Like I said before, the only problem that I have with it is that it's not longer because I was getting into it. I want there to be a second portion to that story, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
I I also have that one as my most underrated. I think it's hilarious. I
Yeah.
think it's like the skit, particularly at the end where he like finishes off the song, and if he's like, and then she said, "Meet my little cousin Justin," and then he's like, "What's up, bro? Nice to meet you." And he's like, "Yeah, nice to meet you too." Like you feel the awkward tension. It's so funny. Oh, it cracks me up. Honestly, part of that song's value to me is how short it is, because not because I don't want it to be longer, but just because of how abruptly it ends. I feel like is part of the experience of the song. You're like,
Yeah.
where's this going? And then just like, boom, it's over like that. And you're like, oh, shoot, that's funny. Um, for me, I had Etouffee at my favorite song on the project.
Wow.
I really really like the production. I really like the lyricism going on here. Government Cheese is another close one for me.
Mm.
But yeah, I really liked Etouffee. I think that one's really well done. My least favorite on the album, again, I don't think this is a bad song, but I do have Shame on the Devil. Um,
Really?
yeah, I just feel like there's stronger moments from him on the project. Like I feel like this theme that he attacks on this song is kind of it's approached on other songs throughout the album just a little bit better. So
Yeah.
like I'm to say worst in air quotes because like
Yeah,
I don't think it's a bad song by any stretch. It's just I feel like other songs approach the same topic in ways that I like better on the album. So
that's fair. I also think in that song, um, the first verse could have been done better. I wrote down that I thought the second verse was much better than the first and probably the saving quality. Well, not just that, but I think it's one of the better choruses. But it does feel, yeah, yeah, I get you.
yeah. Well, I think that wraps up Vince Staples
Yeah.
today. I thought for a minute, like, I mean, I end up having this rated higher than you. I thought you were going to be trying to convince me this is the best album of the decade so far or something
No,
based
never
on
that.
your post the way you talked about it. I was like, oh my gosh.
Nah, see, I've come to realize that if you want to be on the internet, you have to blow everything out of proportion, whether it's
Yeah.
good or bad. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I knew I needed to listen to it again, but you
You just had
know,
to put it out there though.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
sleeping on Vince.
There you go.
Yeah,
All right. Well, until next week,
yeah.
Planet of the Apes next week, maybe, maybe.
Bro, I just have to find people to watch movies with. Everybody
Yeah.
here is lame. Not everybody. I can't say that because if anybody watches, they're gonna get mad at me. Um, I just need to find people to watch.
Maybe they'll watch and realize they need to go to a movie with you, though.
You know what? You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
All right. If you're in Vegas, you want to see Planet of the Apes, hit up
Dude,
Jaden.
just hit up
Leave us a
yeah.
message on the
Please.
podcast. We'll get you linked up.
I'll hang out with some randos. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Sometimes you got to do it. All right. Well, uh, Vince Staples, Dark Times,
Yep.
stamp of approval. It's worth a listen.
Yeah.
It's Mr. Morale if it was a good album. All right. Bon voyage.
Cheers.